My girlfriend reversed time 999 times to save another man, and I was trapped for 3 years too. Chapter 1. The Strange Hourglass. It all began with an urgent call from Mary. Her voice on the other end of the line was breathless, tinged with an excitement I hadn't heard in a long time. "Ethan, you have to come over. There's something I need to show you." She hung up before I could ask any questions. The urgency in her tone left me no choice. I dropped everything and headed to her place. When I arrived, I found Mary standing in her living room, eyes fixed on something sitting atop her old wooden coffee table. She barely acknowledged me, her focus entirely on a small hourglass. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The golden sand inside shimmered, as if it held a light of its own, swirling slowly from one chamber to the other. "What is this?" I asked, stepping closer. There was a weight in the air, a sense that whatever this was, it was important. Mary finally looked up at me, and for a moment I saw a mix of excitement and fear in her eyes. "It's an hourglass," she said, almost in disbelief herself. "But not just any hourglass. It can turn back time." I wanted to laugh. Who wouldn't? The idea was absurd. But Mary wasn't joking. She explained how she had found it in an old, hidden-away antique shop, how the shopkeeper had given it to her with a cryptic smile and words she couldn't forget. "Be careful what you wish for." She'd thought it was some sort of sales pitch, but curiosity got the better of her. When she got home, she flipped the hourglass, and everything changed. "At first, I thought I was hallucinating," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But then I realized it worked, Ethan. It really worked. It took me back to a moment in the past. I could see how much she wanted me to believe her, and, against all logic and reason, I did. Mary had never been one to exaggerate or make things up. If she said the hourglass could turn back time, then maybe it could." She took a deep breath, steadying herself before continuing. "I need your help," she said. "There's someone I have to save." That's when she told me about Puppy. It was a name that made her smile and break all at once. Puppy had been her childhood friend, her closest companion. She described him as a bright-eyed boy, with a laugh that could light up a room. But one day, when they were just 6 years old, everything changed. A car, screeching tires, rain-soaked streets. It was a blur of pain and confusion. Puppy was gone, just like that. Mary had no answers, only a memory that haunted her. "I've always wondered what happened to him," she whispered, her voice cracking. "And now, with this, I have a chance to go back, to save him." The weight of her words pressed down on me. I wanted to help her. I always did. But this was different. This wasn't just about righting a past wrong. It was about tampering with time itself. "Mary," I said carefully, "you don't know what could happen. Changing the past, it's dangerous." "I know," she replied. And for a moment, I saw just how much this had been eating away at her. "But I can't let it go. I need to try. I need to know." She looked at me then, eyes pleading. "Will you help me?" I hesitated, knowing what was at stake. But I couldn't say no. Not to Mary. Not when she was so determined. "Okay," I said. "I'm with you." Her relief was palpable. But then she told me about the catch, the cost of using the hourglass. Every time it turned, it would take away a day of life. She didn't know the specifics of how it worked, only that the shopkeeper's warning had been clear. Time demands its price. Despite that, despite the danger, we both knew what our answer would be. Together, we would face whatever came next, whatever the cost. And so, I stood by Mary's side as she picked up the hourglass and, with trembling hands, prepared to turn it over once more. Chapter 2. Turning Back Time. When the spinning finally stopped, I opened my eyes and found myself standing in a place that felt oddly frozen in time. Everything was unfamiliar. The narrow streets lined with old buildings, the faint smell of flowers mixed with fresh rain, and the distant sound of children laughing. I glanced at Mary, who was already scanning her surroundings with wide, searching eyes. "It's really here," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and determination. "My old neighborhood." I tried to hide my unease. This place meant everything to her, but to me, it was just a strange town I'd never seen before. Mary took a step forward, her hands trembling as she touched the bark of an old tree. She seemed lost in a wave of memories I couldn't reach. "We're back, Ethan. This is where it all happened," she said, turning to me with a determined look in her eyes. "This is where I lost Puppy. I nodded, even though I felt like an outsider in this place. Then we'll find him, I said, trying to match her conviction. Where do we start? Mary led me through winding streets, pointing out landmarks from her childhood. The candy store with a faded sign, the playground with rusting swings, and the park where she said she used to play every day with Puppy. For her, each place seemed alive with memories. For me, it was all just strange. I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place, like a tourist in someone else's life. We reached the park, a modest stretch of grass bordered by tall trees. Mary walked slowly, her gaze darting everywhere, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of her lost friend. "This is where we played," she said softly, "and where it happened." "What do you remember?" I asked gently. She closed her eyes, as if willing herself to go back. "It was raining," she murmured. "We were running, and then there was a car. I remember the sound of tires screeching and Puppy's hand slipping out of mine." Her voice cracked. "After that, everything went dark." A heavy silence fell between us. I wanted to comfort her, to say the right words, but nothing felt enough. Instead, I focused on what we needed to do. "If we're going to save him, we need more than memories," I said. "We need facts." Mary nodded, wiping away a stray tear. Together, we went to the local library, an old brick building that seemed untouched by time. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dusty books. We combed through newspapers and records, searching for any mention of accidents involving children during that period. I could see the desperation in Mary's eyes as we flipped page after page, finding nothing but mundane news stories. It was as if the world had conspired to erase any trace of Puppy's fate. "Maybe it didn't make the news," Mary said, her voice heavy with frustration. "Or maybe I remembered it wrong." "Don't do that," I said firmly. "We're here for a reason. We'll find him." But deep down, doubt was creeping in for both of us. We spent days, or what felt like days, walking the same streets, visiting every corner of the neighborhood, asking questions that led nowhere. Each night, we'd fall asleep exhausted, only to wake up and find ourselves back at the beginning, trapped in a cycle that refused to let us go. I was losing track of time. The repetition was maddening, but Mary kept pushing forward. She was relentless, driven by a need I couldn't fully understand. I admired her strength, but I could see it taking its toll. The spark in her eyes was dimming, replaced by shadows of doubt and exhaustion. One afternoon, as we walked past a small alley, Mari suddenly stopped. This place," she said, her voice trembling. I think I saw him here before it happened." We searched every inch of that alley, questioning people nearby, looking for anything that might be a clue. But once again, we found nothing. As the sun set, Mary slumped against the wall, defeated. "Why can't I remember?" she whispered. "Why can't I save him?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was sit beside her, feeling the weight of our failure pressing down on both of us. I wanted to believe we'd find a way to save Puppy, to break free of this endless loop. But as the day faded into night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time and hope. Chapter 3. The Weight of Repetition. The first few days were bearable, even hopeful. Each morning, I woke up in the same small room we had rented, and every morning, Mary was already up, ready to go. She refused to let go of the hope that today would be different. I tried to match her energy, to keep the belief alive that we'd find Puppy. But as the days stretched into what felt like weeks, a crushing weight began to settle on my chest. The same streets greeted us each day, unchanged. We spoke to the same people, visited the same places, and turned over the same stones, always searching, always hoping. But every night, as we fell asleep exhausted and defeated, we'd wake up back at the beginning. The loop was unrelenting, like some cruel joke. Mary's determination kept her moving forward. She was relentless, never stopping, never slowing down. But I saw the cracks. Her shoulders slumped a little more each day. Her eyes lost some of their spark, and her words grew fewer. She barely ate, barely slept. I worried about her, but I didn't know how to help. I felt helpless, useless. We spent one particularly long day revisiting the park. It had become our central point, the place where it all began. Mary paced back and forth, tracing the same path over and over. "I know it happened here," she said for what must have been the 100th time. "I can feel it." "Mary," I said gently, Maybe we need to look elsewhere. There might be another clue we're missing. She turned on me, eyes blazing. You think I'm wrong? The accusation stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. I think we're missing something, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe there's more to it. Maybe it's not just about finding him. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned away. You don't understand, she muttered. You can't understand. I wanted to argue, to tell her I was trying, that I was here because I cared. But deep down, I knew she was right. This was her battle, her pain. I was just a bystander, caught in her orbit. The days continued to repeat, and I began to feel the weight of every failure. Each morning, I woke up more tired than the last. My body ached, my mind felt heavy. The same faces, the same conversations. It was all too much. I started to wonder if we'd ever escape, if we'd ever find what we were looking for, or if we'd be trapped in this loop forever. One morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Mary, we need to stop, I said, as she prepared to head out again. She didn't even pause. No, she said firmly. I can't stop. I won't. It's killing you, I insisted. Look at yourself. Look at us. We're not making progress. We're just repeating. She turned to me, her face pale and hollow. You don't get it, Ethan. I have to do this. I have to save him. At what cost? I demanded, my voice rising. How many times do we have to fail before you realize it's not working? The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Mary's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand, she whispered. I can't let go. I can't lose him again. The fight left me all at once. I was too tired to argue. I'm here, I said quietly. I'll keep helping, but it's breaking us. We continued our search, but the cracks between us deepened. Mary grew more withdrawn, more obsessed. I tried to stay by her side, to hold on to the hope that we'd find a way. But every day felt like another nail in the coffin of whatever bond we still had. I saw her slipping further and further away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. One night, as I lay awake, I stared at the hourglass on the table. The sand inside glowed faintly in the moonlight. I hated it. I hated what it had done to us, what it was doing to her. I wanted to smash it, to break the loop and end the madness. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had promised Mary I would see this through. The next morning, I woke up feeling more exhausted than ever. Mary was already gone, out searching. I got up, forcing myself to keep going, to keep searching. But deep down, I was starting to lose hope. And I feared that if we didn't find a way soon, we'd be lost in this loop forever. Two broken people chasing a past that refused to be saved. Chapter 4. Breaking Away. The morning began like every other before it, the 999th repetition of the same waking nightmare. I opened my eyes to the same small room, its familiar walls seeming to creep closer with every cycle. The crushing weight of failure pressed down on my chest, making it almost impossible to find the will to move. I forced myself to sit up, feeling the exhaustion of countless resets. When I found Mary, she was already standing by the window, staring down in the street below. The hourglass sat on the table, its surface cracked and the sand within nearly gone, a haunting symbol of our endless, futile attempts to change the past. We need to try again, she said without turning around, her voice flat and hollow. No, I replied, the word escaping before I could stop it. I can't. She turned to face me, eyes blazing with exhaustion and something darker, desperation. You don't get to decide that, she said, her voice rising. I can't stop, Ethan. I won't stop. You're killing yourself, I shot back, my frustration boiling over. We've tried everything, Mary, everything, and it always ends the same way. We're stuck. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the hourglass, holding it like it was the last thing tethering her to reality. You think I don't know that? She snapped. You think I don't feel it? But I can't let go. I can't leave him. Then what about me? I demanded, taking a step closer. Have you even thought about what this is doing to us? To me? The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought she would relent, that the weight of everything would finally break her. But instead, she gripped the hourglass tighter. This isn't about you, she whispered. It's about saving him. Her words hit me harder than any physical blow. You'd sacrifice everything, us, your life, for a memory? He's not just a memory, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. I can't let him go. The room felt suffocating. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I'm done, Mary. I said quietly. I can't keep doing this. She stepped forward, desperation in her eyes. Please, Ethan, just one more time. We're close. I can feel it. But I couldn't. Not anymore. No, I said, shaking my head. It's over. Something in her broke then. She looked at me with a mix of rage and sorrow I'd never seen before. Fine, she said, her voice cold. If you want to leave so badly, then leave. Before I could react, she lifted the hourglass high and turned it over. The world around me spun violently, colors and sounds merging into a chaotic whirlwind. I tried to hold on, but everything slipped away. I felt myself falling. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the softness beneath me. I was lying on a bed, large, luxurious, and surrounded by silk sheets. I sat up slowly, my head pounding. The room was bright and spacious, filled with expensive furniture and decorated with art I didn't recognize. Panic surged through me. This wasn't the small room we'd been trapped in. This wasn't the past. This was something else. I stumbled out of bed, my legs unsteady. Everything about the place screamed wealth. The ornate carvings on the walls, the crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, the plush carpet under my feet. I moved through the room, trying to make sense of it. My reflection in a large mirror caught my eye. I looked the same, physically, but there was a hollowness in my gaze. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Mr. Ethan, a voice called, your breakfast is ready. Mr. Ethan. The words felt wrong, foreign. I opened the door to find a well-dressed servant waiting for me. He bowed slightly and gestured towards a dining area. I followed, my mind racing. The house, my house apparently, was lavish, almost absurdly so. But it didn't feel like mine. None of it did. I sat down at a table laden with food, but I couldn't eat. All I could think about was Mary. The last thing I remembered was her face, broken, desperate, and then the pull of the hourglass. She had pushed me out of the loop, but why? What had it cost her? I needed answers. I needed to find her, to understand what had happened. But as I searched through this strange new life, through the photos of people I didn't know, the evidence of a life I hadn't lived, I realized one thing. I had escaped the loop, but I was more lost than ever. Chapter 5. The search for Mary. The luxury and comfort of my new life felt suffocating. I couldn't accept it. Not when everything I knew had been torn apart. Mary was out there somewhere, and she was the only one who could help me make sense of what had happened. I searched relentlessly, following every lead, every whisper. Weeks passed, and finally a clue led me to a run-down part of the city. It was a stark contrast to the mansion I now called home. Narrow alleys, crumbling buildings, and an air of despair. I found her in a small apartment, barely more than a room with peeling walls and sparse furniture. She looked different, thinner, tired, but still unmistakably Mary. When she saw me, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Relief, sadness, maybe both. You found me, she said, her voice low and weary. I had to, I replied, stepping inside. We need to talk. She gestured for me to sit. I took a chair, the room's silence stretching painfully between us. Finally, she spoke. I saved him, she said, her voice trembling. I saved Puppy. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. You did it? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. Mary nodded, but tears welled up in her eyes. Yes, but it wasn't what I thought. When I went back, I found him, and I saved him. But then I realized something. What? I asked, leaning forward. She took a shaky breath. His real name was Ethan. The world seemed to tilt. What are you saying? You, she said, her voice breaking. Puppy was you. I stared at her, the pieces slowly, painfully falling into place. That's impossible, I whispered. I don't remember any of it. You wouldn't, Mary replied softly. When I saved you, the timeline changed. Time couldn't allow two versions of you to exist. The boy you were, the one I saved, had to be erased from the present. I tried to process what she was saying. Memories, or the faint shadows of them, danced at the edges of my mind. So, I'm only here because you saved me. Mary nodded, tears streaming down her face. When you disappeared as a child, everything changed. You lost your memories. Your family moved away. It was the only way the timeline could hold together. I left Mary's apartment in a daze. I needed confirmation. I went to my parents, the family I barely remembered. At first, they were hesitant. but eventually they confirmed it. When I was a child, I had suffered a traumatic accident and lost my memory. They moved to give me a new start, and we never spoke of it again. It was all true. Mary had saved me, but it had come at a terrible cost, changing everything I'd known. I returned to her, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "You saved me," I said, standing in the doorway. "But at what cost?" Mary looked at me with hollow eyes. "Everything," she whispered. "I lost everything." I stepped inside, and we sat together in silence, knowing we had to face the consequences of what had happened. Together. Chapter 6. The Hollow Choice. The days passed in a blur after Mary's revelation. We tried to make sense of what we had become, but there was no denying it. Something fundamental had changed. I was different. The boy Mary had saved no longer existed, and the man I had become was a stranger to her memories. The connection we once had was fractured, replaced by a vast emptiness neither of us could bridge. We spent hours in that cramped apartment, avoiding the truth we both knew deep down. Mary tried to reach me, to find some spark of who I had been before, but every attempt fell flat. Her words, once so familiar and comforting, now felt distant. I responded out of obligation, not out of genuine emotion. I saw the hurt in her eyes each time I pulled away, but I couldn't force myself to feel what was no longer there. One evening, as we sat across from each other, the silence between us grew unbearable. The hourglass sat on the table, cracked and nearly empty, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Mary stared at it, her hands clenched tightly. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked at her, searching for the right words, but all I felt was numb. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't even know who I am anymore." The pain in her eyes cut deep, but it felt like watching someone else's story unfold, a distant ache rather than a sharp sting. "I saved you," she whispered. I thought we could go back to how things were." "That's just it," I said quietly. "We can't. I'm not the same person. Neither are you." She turned away, her shoulders shaking. I wanted to reach out to offer some comfort, but my hands stayed at my sides. The bond we once had felt like a fading memory, slipping further away with each passing second. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I repeated, the words heavy. "But I can't stay here." The air between us grew colder. Mary nodded slowly, as if she had expected this all along. "So that's it?" she said, her voice hollow. "After everything, you're leaving." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. But even as I spoke, the words felt empty. The connection was gone, and we were just two people clinging to the ghosts of what we once had. "I wish things were different." She didn't respond. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I stood, my movements slow, deliberate. "Take care of yourself, Mary," I said, turning toward the door. "Goodbye, Ethan," she replied, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. It was the end of something that had once meant everything, but now felt like a chapter that needed to close. I stepped outside, the cool night air biting at my skin. I walked through the streets, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Mary had sacrificed everything for me, but we couldn't go back. We were different people now, shaped by time and choices we could never undo. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But that freedom came with a heavy price. I was alone, and the world felt colder than ever. Chapter 7. Moving forward and closing the past. The decision to leave Mary behind was a turning point, but the path forward wasn't easy. Each day felt like walking through fog, unsure of where I was headed or what lay ahead. But slowly, I started to rebuild. The mansion, with all its empty luxury, was the first thing to go. I couldn't bear to stay in a place that represented everything I didn't understand about my new life. I sold it and moved into a modest apartment in the heart of the city. It wasn't much, but it was real, mine to shape and make meaningful. Adjusting wasn't simple. There were mornings when I'd wake up expecting to see Mary or feel the weight of the loop pressing down on me. But instead, I was greeted by silence. A reminder that I was free from the cycle that had once defined every moment. Freedom felt strange. Without a mission to save someone or fight time itself, I had to confront the emptiness within me, the space left behind by everything we'd endured. I threw myself into work, taking on projects that challenged me. The distractions helped at first, but they weren't enough. I needed more than just routine to fill the void. So I reached out to people, old friends, acquaintances I'd lost touch with, and even strangers. Rebuilding connections felt like piecing together fragments of a shattered mirror, but it was worth it. Each conversation, each small act of kindness reminded me that life could be more than just survival. One evening, I found myself walking through the old neighborhood. The memories were still there, ghosts of a past that would never be erased. I stopped by the park, the same place where Mary and I had tried to change everything. Watching children play, their laughter filling the air, I realized how much time I had wasted clinging to the past. I'd been so focused on rewriting history that I'd forgotten how to live in the present. In that moment, I understood something important. The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Mary and I had tried to bend time to our will, to fix what we thought was broken. But in doing so, we'd lost sight of the simple truth that life is meant to be lived forward, not backward. Dwelling on what was lost only deepened the wounds. Healing meant accepting that some things couldn't be changed, and that was okay. I sat on the bench, letting the realization wash over me. Regret had been my constant companion, but it didn't have to control me anymore. I could choose to let go, to forgive myself and Mary for everything we'd done. We'd acted out of love, fear, and desperation, but we'd done our best with what we had. It was time to move on. In the weeks that followed, I made a conscious effort to focus on the present. I volunteered at community centers, helped organize events, and found joy in the small moments. A warm cup of coffee, a good conversation, the quiet of a morning walk. The scars of the past didn't disappear, but they became a part of me, reminders of lessons learned. I often thought of Mary. I hoped she had found her own peace, her own way to move forward. We were bound by our shared history, but we were no longer trapped by it. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to live despite the pain. One afternoon, I found myself speaking to a group of young people about resilience and growth. I told them about mistakes without revealing the fantastical details, and how clinging to regret could consume you. The past is important, I said, but don't let it weigh you down. Learn from it. Let it make you stronger, but never let it stop you from moving forward. As I walked home, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Life moved forward, as it always did. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to move with it. The past was behind me, a part of my story, but not its end. I had a future to build, a life to live, and I was determined to embrace it, step by step, without looking back.